Oh, hello. Yes, well, we made it to the weekend. Hurrah for that. It was a long week last week. Anyway, today I thought we'd talk about pseudo-scientific things. Yes. It's a lovely word. It's being used increasingly in and around trans issues because having decided that there's no such thing as trans and the CAS review proving that, we can now move to debunking everything that we don't like in and around it. It becomes pseudoscience. There's a very rapid movement to that. So pseudoscience, which is a word that I want you to think about just briefly because it means that something isn't scientific. And today in the Daily Telegraph there was this headline which naturally, due to my experience, drew my eye. Autism schools signed up to LGBT charter pushing pseudoscience trans ideology. Yes. Now, if you take away the words pushing in a school, they mean has stuff in it which may or may not be teaching materials. Pseudoscientific, well, anything we don't like is pseudoscientific. Again, come back to that word, trans ideology, which we well know, therefore you see trans isn't real, and therefore it's an ideology, and because it isn't real, it's pseudoscience. You see, it neatly fits together. Kames, which takes children from age 5, accused of breathtaking recklessness over what it teaches vulnerable pupils. Yes, anyway, let's dive into the article, shall we? And we'll unpack it slightly. Now, a school for severely autistic children has signed up to a controversial LGBT charter pushing pseudoscientific, in inverted commas you notice, so they're quoting somebody here, transgender ideology. Now, this is where instantly I go into my 20 years of working with people on the spectrum style view of the world. Okay, severely autistic children. Now, one of the problems that we have in and around autism is using the correct word to describe an individual. We can generalise, this particular piece in the Telegraph is full of generalisations, but we can generalise slightly about autistic people, but not much. It used to be that we would talk about high-functioning autism, or maybe those people on the Asperger's spectrum with Asperger's, because that was a particular diagnosis, which has now been lost in the sort of general melee that is the diagnosis of autism. When I used to give people tours around the school, I used to run, I suppose. I used to say to them, one of the things about a lot of conditions that children might be born with is that you can generalise about them quite a lot. Let's say, if you think about Down syndrome, for example, you know that if you're presented with someone with Downs, they come in the door and you know that they've got Downs, you know that within a generalised range, cognitive range, what those people are going to be like. You can generalise reasonably about Downs. The thing is about autism, you can't, because you might well say, well, the next person that comes in the room is going to be autistic. It might well be the person that comes bounding up to you and is in your face because they had no concepts of social boundaries. Or it might be the person that can't come in the room because you're there, who has very heightened views of social boundaries and is fearful of you. Two completely different behaviour groups, same diagnosis. And you might well have people on the autistic spectrum who are non-verbal. You may well have people on the autistic spectrum who are sort of genius level and are brilliant at things like maths, very often because it's very logical and straightforward. Show me a child that's got a maths degree at 14 and I'll show you someone who's likely to be on the autistic spectrum. They never get a history degree. Anyway, moving on from that, experts, actually it's just one in this article, but let's not worry about that, accuses Kames School in Edinburgh, which takes children from age of 5, of breathtaking recklessness over how it teaches concepts of biological sex and gender to vulnerable pupils. Right, okay, now I've gone on the school's website, and yes, they don't tend to take what we used to call high-functioning kids, so they don't do things like exams, etc. They tend to be one of those kind of middle-ish range autistic schools. Link down below if you want to see for yourself. Now, concepts of biological sex and gender to vulnerable pupils. Well, yes, they're vulnerable, but all pupils are vulnerable. Let's face it, whenever we talk about trans issues, all pupils are vulnerable, aren't they? All women are vulnerable to trans people, and all, cats, dogs, monkeys, goats, and probably slugs are vulnerable as well. It's just one of those words that comes with it, along with ideology and now increasingly pseudoscience. But yes, okay then, so it's a school, basically is what you're saying. There is a strong, but as yet poorly understood link between autism and young people reporting gender identity issues. Yes, indeed, and it would be nice if we could do some research into that, but there isn't any. Okay, nobody's actually gone out of their way to find out why it is that so many young people with a diagnosis of autism also report issues in and around whatever phrase you want to use. Let's call it gender dysphoria or whichever. Okay, I have my own personal viewpoints about that, some of which are based on my politics, some of which are based on my everyday observations, if you like. We all have different theories or an ideological perspective, if you want to be picky about these things. But mine is based on about 20 years of actually working with young people like this. And as ever, with the whole thing about trans issues, I'd like to know more, all right, so I can help the young people that I'm working with more. And simply, if you like, very much like this article does, jumping up and down and suggesting effectively banning things isn't really going to make my life any easier. Anyway, studies suggest transgender and gender diverse individuals are up to 6 times more likely to be autistic, as reported in the Cass Review. Okay, documents show that Cambridge School has overhauled its curriculum to become trans-inclusive in a bid to win charter status from activist charity LGBT Youth Scotland. In brackets, yes, indeed. I'm just going to leave that particular paragraph on its own because that's just a particular line that the Daily Telegraph is saying. They may well have sought in the past to get charter status. Okay, it might be one of those things that they apply for. Lots of schools that teach with young people on the spectrum seek accreditation from the National Autistic Society, for example, because they think that those things might well attract parents to them. You can make up your own mind about that. Anyway, here we go into the nitty-gritty of the horrific trans ideology there is in the school. So hang on, it'll be a rough ride. Examples include Spanish language being adapted to become gender neutral in lessons to address what is seen as an unfortunate grammatical dependence on masculine and feminine terms. Notice the quote there, which comes completely out of nowhere. Now, I'm willing to bet that there's a bit of material that someone's managed to find somewhere in the school which is aimed at the teaching staff, which will include that. Now, I am going to be very doubtful that the students in that school are actually learning the Spanish language. I'm just going to put that one out there, okay? And I'm not convinced about this. And if you think that adopting gender-neutral Spanish terms is going to make someone question their gender identity, good luck with that one, but I would have my doubts. If that's your best you've got, I want to see the others. Right, so here we go then. Messages on school notice boards dedicated exclusively to LGBT issues tell pupils to come out for the LGBT. Other slogans include LGBT plus matters must be part of us. Statements such as trans women are real women have also been put on display. Yes, somebody's seen a couple of posters and object to them. And again, if you think that individual posters can make people believe things that they didn't half an hour earlier, I will tip my hat to you. Let's move on. Pupils have been shown an image of a gingerbread person, again in inverted commas, don't know where that quote comes from, in assemblies designed to teach them about the difference between gender and sex, and are told it is fine and valid if they do not match. Again, all of these quotes, and I don't know where they're from. One might almost start calling this pseudo-scientific, because I don't know where this stuff comes from. I know what they mean by the gingerbread image. It's probably one that you can see on some of my other videos that I've highlighted, whereby we might well, when we're talking to younger children about such issues, we might well use a gingerbread issue. It's a stretch to call it indoctrination. Of course it is, though. But if you don't like it in the first place, if you don't really like trans people, if you don't really like gay people, then everything like this is indoctrination. So far we've got a notice board, a thing in an assembly, and a Spanish lesson, right? Okay, which is all making the children trans. Okay, is there any more? There's one more, and this could well be the cherry on the cake. Reading materials in the school include a book. Wow. There's reading materials in the school which include a book, titled Are You a Boy or Are You a Girl? Written by trans activists Sarah Fisher and Fox Fisher and endorsed by LGBTYS and Stonewall. Yes, there's a book in the school. There you go. Okay, so there you have it, guys. Okay, the moment you put a book about something in a school, the children will believe it. And it will change the view of themselves, along with learning pronouns in a Spanish lesson. Okay, that's this view of the world. Again, think about the word pseudo-scientific there. Let's move on, shall we, and see who it actually is that's coming out with this stuff. Well, it's Carolyn Brown, a retired former educational psychologist who helped the Scottish Government draw up a national autism strategy. Okay, described the approach taken by the school as grossly irresponsible. All right, okay then. So do the quotes come from her? We don't know. Now, when you do a dig about this woman, she does appear to be tied into a lot of Christian organisations like Christian Institute, and I'm guessing that's where she comes from. She is, she's a retired former educational psychologist. Okay then, great. She has a viewpoint which is no doubt governed by her particular worldview and her experience with young people. A bit like me. Okay, bit like me, but I don't get interviewed about my views about trans and autistic people, autistic young people, because I don't fit into the Telegraph's model. I certainly don't set up organisations, which is just me in my bedroom. Anyway, moving on. This is the opposite of what a specialist or school in autism should be doing, she said. These youngsters will interpret things very literally and see the world in black and white. And this is where we get into the definite pseudoscience, because as I've said earlier, autistic people are all very, very different, and the manifestations of their autism can come across as very, very, very individual. Now, if you want to generalise enormously about autistic people, you can say that very many of them will tend to be quite literal and will tend to see the world in black and white terms. One of the reasons why so many young people are attracted to fascism. It's black and white. It's got good people and bad people in it, which of course is a lot easier about thinking about things than seeing a muddied world. But it's a bit simplistic, isn't it? I've worked with an awful lot of young people on the spectrum who sure as hell have a very, very, very nuanced view of the world. And yet, in what we might call the medical model of autism, I'm often told that they're all about all the things they can't do. I remember clearly working with a young man who his mother assured me that he had no understanding of sarcasm. He really did. His autism did manifest itself in some unusual behaviour in the classroom, but he was entirely capable of understanding concepts like metaphor, nuance, sarcasm, et al. And even then, he was autistic. So which of the two of us, me or Ms. Brown, is being pseudoscientific here? Because I am seeing the world as complicated, because it is, and she is seeing the world in black and white terms. If I say to an autistic person, you're gay, do you think that'll make them gay? Patently not. And yet, magically, if you have a book in a school, singular, book in a school, and something on a notice board, it will completely change their view of who they are, because they're autistic and cannot think. I find those things just a little bit too much of a stretch. Anyway, if you tell them they can be a member of the opposite sex, then they will really believe that. Showing them nonsense like the gingerbread person, again, we don't get an example of what that is. You can probably find it in my previous videos, which is highly regressive and misleading, is only going to make them very confused. Ah, yes, you see. And then suddenly we get into the vulnerable children and that whole safeguarding thing, because if there's one thing you can definitely pull out the hat when you don't like something trans in school, it's a safeguarding issue, isn't it? Yes, you would expect schools, especially ones that specialise in autism, to respond very cautiously and with great care in this area. Instead, youngsters are being fed pseudoscience presented to facts, and so are the staff. It's shocking and breathtaking. Aha, where the breathtaking thing came from, indeed. Well, there you have it. You see, that's her, and then it goes on about the CAS review. So we have all of those experts, which is one person, and we have all these deep worries. And I would hate to be a member of staff at that school at the moment, because no doubt they're going to get inundated with the press hanging around outside and generally bothering them. But what this is basically that somebody has found a few things in a school that they don't like. They've told Mrs. Brown, and she's jumped up about it, and the Daily Telegraph have decided to do so as well. However, it's not science, is it? Okay. If you want to talk about pseudoscience, we can talk about people that write articles for the Christian Institute. Science, Christians, no. Okay, pseudoscience, and an ideology at that. Yes. Anyway, have a look at those articles, make of them what you will. But we will see a lot more of this stuff. People are very, very determined to eradicate anything about trans issues in schools, and then they will very, very, very rapidly move on to anything about being gay, because it's a gateway to being trans. And they will swear blind that that's the case, because although they will complain bitterly about ideology and they will complain bitterly about pseudoscience, they live in a world where their ideology is absolutely fine, and their nonsensical beliefs about the way that young people operate in the world are accepted as fact. Anyway, rant over, I suppose. Do have a lovely Saturday. I'm so pleased it is Saturday. I'm so pleased that the sun is out and I can not teach any maths this week. I've had enough of maths lessons this week. It's doing me bleeding head in. Anyway, do have a lovely one.